probably the hardest thing for me is having so much of my identity, nearly all of my identity for about a decade, tied up in who I was at work, the success, the titles, the whatever. All leaders say I want to bring on people who are smarter than me. There's an element of fear when you do that. I think good leaders overcome that fear and make the right decision.
Yeah, bingo. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Fearful Giants, the podcast that's getting loud about something most leaders never talk about out loud, their fear. I'm Clay Stelzer, executive coach and founder of 1560, the executive coaching company. And every week I sit down with a founder, a CEO, or an executive leader to talk about the stuff they're not typically talking about or posting about on LinkedIn. And today we've got Janell Pittman here. And if you don't know Janell, she's a marketing and transformation leader who has spent her career helping organizations grow, evolve, and connect more deeply with the people they serve. She's now a partner and fractional CMO at Chief Outsiders, after sitting in the role of Chief Marketing and Digital Strategy Officer of MercyOne in Iowa, which is a really big deal. Prior to then, she was also a big deal, acting as the Vice President and General Manager at Meredith, supporting many major brands, including AllRecipes, Martha Stewart, and Better Homes and Gardens. And I'm just so excited to have you here, Janell. Welcome.
Excited to be here, Clay.
We've known each other for a long time. We met each other in business school 23 years ago.
That sounds like a long time, Clay.
It's bananas. Can you believe it? It's been 23 years.
No, it seems like yesterday in a lot of ways.
Like in so many ways. I cannot believe it's been this long, but here we are. And I think what's so cool about this interview is we've known each other for a really long time, but we haven't really gotten to know each other at a super deep level. We were acquaintances. I don't think we were best buds, but actually, as we've gotten to know that this past year, we've hung out a little bit more, and I'm really excited to kind of dive in and have a really fun, meaningful conversation with you today. There are a couple of topics, or a few topics I want to talk about. I want to talk about this idea of excellence. And when I think of excellence, I mean, there's lots of facets around this idea of excellence, but you come to mind when I think of professional excellence and how I remember you back in business school. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Then I want to talk about culture and managing culture in large organizations, which you've done for many years. And then finally, I want to talk about your shift from being this chief insider, being now a chief outsider, working as a fractional CMO supporting CEOs. How's that sound?
Let's go.
Okay, let's go. Let's do it. I'm going to embarrass you a little bit here. I'm going to shower you with praise, and I hope you'll indulge me with that for just a minute. So here's what I remember of you when we first met. Here's my recollection. In business school, by the way, it's Indiana University's Kelley School of Business. That's where Janell and I both went. And you were the pride and joy of Bloomington, Indiana. When you walked through the halls, everyone put down their things, they parted ways, and they started applauding. That's my recollection of you. How accurately am I remembering our world together at Kelley?
I think it must have really been 23 years ago. I do not remember things. I do not remember things quite that way.
Yeah. Well, I'm being a little bit dramatic, but what I do honestly remember about you is that you kind of set the standard. You were sort of the pace car. We were both in the marketing world, and man, you were hitting them out of the park pretty regularly. I think you kept everyone on their game. Since then, from what I know about you and your journey, you've sort of kind of kept that going. Your batting average seems to be really, really quite excellent. So I wanted to talk with you about that. And I think a really fun place to talk about that is I want to know where that came from. I want to know what was 15-year-old Janell like? Who is the Janell that became the adult Janell?
So thankfully, you gave me just a little bit of a preview of the types of questions that we were going to talk about. And I raised this question with my parents this morning. And
Cool.
They wanted to go on record that what drives that and why is because of them and because of how they raised me.
So we'll give them all the credit. That's amazing. I love it. We should phone them in. Can you just call them in real quick? Let's have a 4-way call here.
that is way too risky. Yeah, I really wish I knew. I don't see anything that I do as setting out necessarily for excellence as a goal. I just have a lot of fun learning and trying new things and tackling hard stuff, especially when it comes to building, is just really fun for me. So I wish I had a better answer for you. 15-year-old Janelle actually was very much the same. I remember once getting in trouble with my parents for being out late, and my mom was convinced I was doing something that I shouldn't be doing. I'm like, Mom, it's at the dance studio. I was choreographing for class and like having to prove that I was not doing something bad. And really, I was just, working, being creative.
That's cool. So for me, my relationship with excellence, when I hit one out of the park, there's a dopamine hit. It's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
ooh, like that feels good. I want more of that. Do you remember that first taste of dopamine? That first, like, ooh, I like being excellent. I like producing excellent results.
Fifth grade or sixth grade, I was the captain of the safety patrol
The
in
safety patrol. I
the
love it.
safety patrol. Yes. And I do think those experiences, along with the positive reinforcement that comes from it, really is easy to become trapped in, I guess. That's a good question. A few others, a really big one was in college, I saw the need for developing leaders at the business school to be leaders. I went to University of Missouri and lots of the leadership across campus came from the Greek system. Member the Greek system, fully supported that. But I was thinking, as leaders, we take classes in leadership at the business school. Why aren't there more leaders from the business school? So, together with partner in crime, we did a lot of things together. Chris Alkyle Carlgren, we started the Excellence Through Leadership conference, and that is actually still going on. I've gotten to go back and participate in it. And I really get joy in seeing other people do really well, be happy, and see organizations build and grow. So that is a huge dopamine hit for me. And that's probably the beyond safety patrol. That's probably the
Yeah.
first big one.
Well, secretly, maybe not secretly because I'm talking about it. I may want to spend the next 45 minutes talking about the fifth grade safety patrol. However, because that would be amazing. Like, do you still have your sash or whatever that thing
No,
is?
you have to turn that in.
Oh, you got to turn it back in.
But I did get a badge and everything.
That's cool. You got a badge. Do you still have the badge? Is
No,
that what's
no,
behind you over your left
no.
shoulder? Is that your safety patrol badge?
No.
Okay, well, I guess we can talk about work and being grown-ups and all this other stuff. So, okay, cool. So you got your first taste in the safety patrol stuff, and then you kind of got into this idea of leadership and excellence. When I think about excellence in my own life, and I work with lots of executive leaders, and the motivation to be excellent or to create excellent can come from lots of different places. Like for me, the motivation to be excellent, what I would call, I use this analogy. Actually, you may know about this, the above the line, below the
Mhm.
line analogy.
Love it.
I was below the line, meaning I was in a fearful state of mind. I was basically being excellent as a safety mechanism versus you can do the very same thing, be just as excellent from above the line, which is basically you're having fun, you're curious, you're just in a creative space. So I'm kind of curious. I mean, you've already mentioned a couple times here that you just have fun creating cool things and excellence is a byproduct of that. But I actually would love to hear from you about any relationship you have with creating excellence from above or below the line. Again, from a mindset of fear, where if I'm not excellent, then that's not good, or above the line where this is just fun being excellent.
So I think the origins came from it's just fun, success, what have you, expectations that come out of that become pressure and create the negative side of it. And I know that that absolutely has also been a component and a driver. And I try to pay attention when it's the below the line piece of it. Absolutely, both have been a part for me.
Yeah. What's the best part of winning? What's the best part of excellence for you?
When a team achieves something that they didn't think they could do, For me, that's the best part because sure, I get joy and achievement and pride and all those things out of doing something hard. But when we do it together and other people are genuinely excited, I guess I get excited about like the dopamine hit of momentum. And a lot of times that comes from the people around you now also being bought in and energized. And that's the direction of my nonlinear thoughts on this.
Yeah, cool. I know it's kind of weird to be spending a morning being bombarded with questions about how you process excellence. Yeah, got it. So that explains some of the above the line motivation. And you've already talked about this leadership and education or excellence and leadership, the educational component of it. There's other people in the recipe. Supporting others to be excellent seems to be part of your own fulfillment, which is really
Hmm.
cool. And I
Absolutely.
imagine when we start talking about MercyOne and Meredith, I imagine that's part of your equation as well. Yeah, so that's kind of above line stuff. Like, boy, I just love helping others create whatever they're wanting to create in the world. You did mention, however, a minute ago that after you had achieved some level of excellence, there was some pressure. There was this expectation of excellence. That's a trap many of us can get in. You talk a little bit about what that expectation, how that lived within you?
I can share one. This is not excellence, but it plays in. So I have never been fired from a job. And when I started in consulting way back in the very beginning of my career, the partner said, and don't worry if you get fired from a job, it happens to everybody, client situations, whatever, don't worry about it. When I finished my tenure at PwC, which then became IBM, never been fired. I'm like, oh, cool. And then every job, rounds of layoffs. And so then I became afraid of being fired, not because of like the money or what have you, just for the I'm afraid of this. And I think in some situations, especially cultures that are less than positive, where there is a lot of fear and financial distress, I know that the ways I interpreted that were not positive.
Well, for many people that excel their whole lives, that's oftentimes a driver. Like, I can't even fathom the idea of being fired or of not being excellent.
Right, because it does, and this fades into, probably more of my story. It does feed into what you allow yourself to take on. If you don't pay attention to it, you can end up being boxed in and not taking on big things where you could fail, things that need to be tackled. And I think you have to be aware of that so that you don't let it influence your actual decisions. I know when I was working at Meredith, I really wanted to make vice president. Really, really wanted to do that. And had an opportunity to bring on someone new into the organization, and they were absolutely better than me. Absolutely better than me. And I found myself thinking, wow, I'll bring her on. She will absolutely do the work that, excel and everything, but ooh, what's that going to mean for me? I paused. Okay, Janelle, that's stupid. You need to do the right thing for the business. And it actually ended up that because I had brought her on and she was able to so well do the things that that part of the business needed, I ended up being promoted into a vice president role in something else, But it was a moment of fear. All leaders say, I want to bring on people who are smarter than me. There's an element of fear when you do that. I think good leaders overcome that fear and make the right decision.
Yeah, bingo. Yeah, I hear this all the time, and I actually love it. I've heard many CEOs say, my job is to put myself out of a job. My job is to support the people underneath me to excel. And I really do love that. It requires maturity, emotional maturity, and a lot of courage because so many of us associate our identities with our excellence or our success at work. So if I'm not the person with the answer and I'm letting someone below me get the kudos for being brilliant, well, then who am I? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
a tough one for most leaders.
it absolutely has been for me. Probably the hardest thing for me is having so much of my identity, nearly all of my identity for about a decade, tied up in who I was at work, the success, the titles, the whatever. When I decided to take a break, that was the biggest challenge for me. And I was intentional in thinking through making that separation and saying that's very narrow. It's an opportunity for me to figure out who I am outside of work. Terrifying.
Yeah.
Terrifying
Okay.
to do that. But I couldn't be more glad that I did, because now I get intellectually stimulating and challenging work, making an impact, and I have life and joy outside of work, which was a momentary blip in the before days and now is the constant state.
I love that you had that experience. And I don't know much about this break you took. I love that you took the break for a few reasons. Well, one, it's just really great to reset and think about life as beyond our roles in work. However, I think the best thing we can do to eliminate the fear that gets in the way of our bigness and our aliveness is to expose ourselves to the thing we're most scared of and realize, wait a minute, I'm still here. The sky didn't fall. I'm still a loving, caring person that is lovable and worthy of all of what I have and all, that realization is so, so important. Another variation of that is when people that refuse to fail, they can't possibly even imagine failing or being fired. When they get fired, when they fail, it's the best thing that could ever happen for them. Because then it's like, well, I've been through the fear and it's not nearly as paralyzing as I thought it might be. It might sting, but usually the growth that comes from that experience can be the best thing that ever happens to us. I would love to actually talk a little bit about that. So, what was that experience like for you? Like, you took a break, all of a sudden, I'm imagining, who am I if I'm not excellent at work? That's a big emotional conflict. How did you move through that and come out the other side?
Yeah. So first, I had fabulous supports around me. One, I had my husband, very supportive, saying, Janelle, this job is going to kill you. So that is a motivator. I had the mentor who suggested the idea of taking a break. And I'm like, what? We don't do that. That's just not even like, huh? And she let me sit with it for a bit. And then I realized, I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, I can do this, because I saw it as quitting initially. And then I'm like, no, I need to take a break. I've been at this for decades. I've been running really hard. Why not take a break? And for me, it was really helpful to reassess outside of the positive reinforcement and inertia. What is it that I really want to do? What is it that I enjoy most? We can get into that, but some more on the process. The mentor that I met was through an organization called Exceptional Women's Alliance. Lorraine Siegel is the founder of that. Just amazing visionary powerhouse woman. And I had a cohort of women who would hold me accountable to, what are your priorities? Is your time lined up with your priorities? And Lorraine actually designed a mentor process around, very intentional about, yeah, what are your priorities? How is your time aligned? What are you valuing? Are the decisions that you're making aligned with what you're valuing? Another thing that was fabulous about this organization is I got to see other people creating their own paths, not just, okay, here's the next step on the ladder. And all of the options that were available to achieve the things that I wanted. And it really built around those values, allocated time around those values, made decisions about opportunities around those values. And seeing inspiration from one of the women in my cohort is a 3-star general. Her path, entirely different than mine. She wows me every time she opens her mouth. She had retired and went on to be the sergeant at arms of the US Senate. Again, not my path. She was approaching retirement from there. I'm thinking about, what is her next journey going to be? So just the intentionality of seeing that really gave me inspiration and confidence that all of these other people have done this. And it is possible to create impactful life around the things that are important to you. And now, anytime I get the chance to talk to someone who's considering big moves, risky moves, I love what they say back in terms of seeing what I've done and then giving them confidence to do the same.
Well, I'm so happy you were part of an organization to support you. And people probably get sick of hearing me yap about this, but I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a minute. This whole like lonely at the top thing that so many senior executives deal with, it's real and it's totally optional. If you're listening, you're a senior executive and you're in this, like stuck state, go get into a forum. There's a zillion organizations. You gotta have inspiration from people around you and you don't need to go alone. And it's always fun for me to hear the benefits of these types of groups and stories like the one you just shared. So I'm so thrilled that you had that group to support you.
Yeah. I didn't know that I needed it because you hear that lonely at the top thing, but I don't know. I don't feel like people really talk about it. And
Right.
when this organization approached me about joining, it's exactly what I needed. I remember going on a walk with my husband because it wasn't cheap to join. And he's like, "You want to pay what? Don't you already have friends? Like you've got this person and this person. You talk to them every Saturday at soccer practice or, at the soccer games." I'm like, "Honey, when they ask me what I do, I say I work at the hospital." It's not the same. And having that network of people where you don't have to explain the stress of being up for a 6 a.m. call and working till whenever, or the board meeting, or the nuance of whatever, not having to explain that and being truly able to talk to peers is absolutely invaluable. I'm
Yeah.
joining your soapbox play.
It's fun up here on the soapbox, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not lonely.
There you go. I was feeling all alone. I'm so grateful that you joined me up here, Janelle. By the way, listeners out there, if you're sitting there thinking, maybe I should consider being in a group. If you don't know where to start, reach out to me. Happy to. I know a lot of these different groups. And of course, you can hop on ChatGPT and in 3 seconds, you'll have some great options as well. But go get yourself into a forum or a group. Life-changing stuff. It has been for me.
What group are you in, Clay?
I've been in a lot of different groups. I was in a forum, a couple of various forums within an organization called the Conscious Leadership Group. It was a very particular kind of forum, but it was all executive leaders learning how to wake up in life, learning how to spot their own patterns, which is kind of the foundation of all of my coaching methodologies, which you're familiar with at some level. And then I'm a member of EO, which is the Entrepreneurs Organization, which is an incredible organization. There's branches all over the world. Every major city has one. Really cool. I'm part of another community called Provisors, which is kind of a community of professional service advisors. A little bit different than a forum, but also it's a bunch of people supporting one another. A little bit different. But anyway, I love this kind of stuff. I just love being in a circle of people to have to support one another. Really powerful. So you had this break. I'm imagining this break was pretty pivotal in your life. I bet there's kind of like the before the break and the after the break. I'm actually imagining this break is what it did lead you to where you are now in your career with your new role, which I want to talk about in a bit. But I want to talk about, I mentioned 15-year-old or young Janelle earlier, and I would love to get your sense as to how 15-year-old Janelle and present day Janelle would define excellence differently or success. You pick excellence or success.
Actually, I can tell you what 15-year-old Janelle would define because I remember this moment. So I wanted to work at a bank. This tells you where my priorities were a little screwy. Okay. I wanted to work at a bank and I wanted to wear pantyhose, also crazy. Like somehow I
Right.
associated that with success. Who knows? I needed more mentors in my life at 15, apparently. And as we were driving by, I saw a big, tall skyscraper with lights on. And I'm like, I want to be the person that's there. There, because be working late and hard is important. And I think that is probably something around that is what 15-year-old Janelle would be thinking about. How I think about success is impact. And I see that in terms of impact within the community, impact for my clients in this situation previously would have been impact for the organization. And a new element is having life outside of those things. And for me, that's a huge challenge. Someone was actually asking me today what my goals were. And I said, really, my goal is impact with having the life. And I was describing this to someone from an older generation where this is probably not that component may not be important, but that really is my goal. And the impact part of it is easy.
Yeah.
It's the life part of it that's not. And that for me is my challenge.
Yeah. And the irony with that is most leaders that I've worked with, including myself, when we have the courage enough to go and invest in things that aren't work to fill our hearts, our spirits, the impact we can create back at work is actually greater. It's,
Absolutely.
yeah. So we're terrified to like take our foot off the work pedal, but when we do, work actually becomes quite easier and more fulfilling, has been my experience.
Absolutely. And I think if you go back to the fear part, it's for me, can I still be excellent at work if I'm dedicating energy to things outside of work?
Yeah. Yeah. And my guess is you've had enough experience in that concern that that fear is sort of not as strong as it once was. Is that accurate?
Now, yes. However, just being very tactical and tied to right now, this Q1 has been really intense for my client work. And I've been finding myself over investing in that work, definitely sacrificing some, more weekend time than I want. And not to say we shouldn't work hard. I'm not saying that at all, but over investing just because I had to succeed, couldn't not succeed. So that's why I still have to watch myself. Even though I know it's possible to have both, I still have to watch myself.
Yeah. The ghosts from Christmas past are real.
Yes,
We don't lose those parts of ourselves. I just think we get into better relationship with them.
that's a great way to look at it, Clay. It's a great way to look at it. And
Yeah.
I will 1000% say when you make those time investments outside of work, you are absolutely better at work. And I did not believe that. I read all of the articles that say take a vacation and you'll be better, 40 hours, whatever, and you'll be better. I never believed it, never believed it. And then actually for my team, because shocker, if your boss is acting like this, the team feels pressure to act like this.
Hmm.
So, really, for my team, I started modeling going on vacation. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have all these ideas now. And then, of course, the team was thankful. And then they're like, now I feel like I can do this now. Thank you. And, what have you. So the team was better. I was happier and the work was better.
Bravo. I say it 3 times a day to various people. Culture rolls downhill. People are watching you at the top and they will model you or they will follow in your footsteps. However, you're showing up is creating permission for them to show up. However, you know, anyway. Well, can I share a secret with you? Whenever I feel like I need to be a little bit more excellent, you know what I do?
Take a break.
I put on a pair of pantyhose. I'm sorry, Janelle. It's Friday. This is the me. I mean, that was low hanging fruit. I had to add that in here, but I actually love that. Oh my gosh. I'm going to wear pantyhose. I love that 15-year-old
Who on
Janelle. That
earth wants to wear? I don't own pantyhose now. Who on earth wants to do that? That was really dumb.
15-year-old Janelle wants to wear pantyhose. That's who. I love it. I love that. That's what her definition was. I think it's adorable. I think it's
And
amazing.
gold jewelry
And
too.
what
Gold
jewelry?
jewelry.
Gold jewelry. Yeah. Yeah.
Who
Okay.
knows?
Well, back in the 80s or whenever, like
Yes, yes, yes.
the big gold Rolex was kind of the thing. Like that was the baby boomer I don't know, metaphor for success. So that doesn't surprise me. That was in our culture. So one more question around this and then I want to get into MercyOne and some of your other work. We talked about your transition and your relationship with success 15-year-old to now, but I'm actually curious, how do you imagine 65-year-old Janelle will define excellence or success?
That's interesting. And I was thinking about that recently, like, because, yeah, I was thinking about that. And I don't know. I am so happy now that I sort of see it being the same, but then also knowing myself and knowing that I'm always learning and curious and evolving, like that feels stagnant to me. So something will be different, but I don't know
Yeah.
what.
Yeah. Yeah. Who knows what? I love that question. I love thinking about it.
Hmm.
What is the lesson I have yet to learn? I don't know. That's a
Hmm.
fascinating thing to think about.
What about you?
What is my 65-year
Yeah.
old Clay gonna think? I think, it's gonna be like, hey, big dummy, you should have just been a goofball and play and bring your heart forward all along. And I've really shifted I was a wreck in the earlier part of my life, and now I can talk about wearing pantyhose publicly with you. Like the playful, goofy, fun-loving Clay is here, and I'm imagining 65-year-old Clay is gonna just be even more playful and not at all considering all the work stuff and whatever as being very meaningful at all. Kind of like you, like I love where I'm at right now. I love the impact I'm creating. I don't think 65-year-old Clay is going to make that less meaningful, but I think 65-year-old Clay is going to realize that success creating impact can be a byproduct of being a free spirit and being present and playful. Yeah, we'll see. Let's do another one of these in a few years. Not a few years, in a number of years, whenever that is. Okay, so I want to talk about MercyOne. So I read up a little bit about what you were doing back then, and we talked a little bit about it. And you had a massive transformation effort, from what I understand. This whole branding exercise, and the statistics I see or I read is that you had 18,000 colleagues across 230 plus locations that all had to come together under a single brand. That's a big deal. That's a pretty monumental effort. And what part of that were you responsible for?
So I was brought on to help the organization face the market as one. So go from those 18 organizations. I had a fabulous CEO who really trusted me. And so shortly after joining, he gave me the task of aligning the organization around our vision. And then part of that work was learning that across all of those locations and across all of those brands, all the organizations were different and definitely saw themselves as different. So the challenge of being able to face the market as one when we were not one became very apparent. And so I proposed together with another colleague that we invest in culture work so that we could see ourselves as one before we went out and tried to tell the outside world that we were one. So, and ultimately I then led the culture work, helped to form our first system-wide strategic plan, and then ultimately led the digital health strategy as well. I talk about that role as being a unicorn because opportunity, and you know this from our days at Kelly, when you can align your strategy, your brand, and your culture, and you're doing that work at the same time, meaning you've got that alignment, that kind of work is what creates the transformation that we saw there.
So I imagine, it was a massive undertaking. Some of it you probably could have predicted. What was the most surprising part of that journey for you?
I'll have to say, even I was surprised by the momentum that we created. So, and I'll just give an example of that. Lots of places, but especially in healthcare, when you think of things like changing signs, universally almost that is, why are we doing that? It's expensive. And there's that, connection to your legacy history. So it's tearing down my legacy, all of those things. And we had parties all around the state as those changes were happening, celebrating it. And we talked a lot about the brand being a sign of change, not a change of sign. And that's just literally an example of that happening. People celebrating us coming together.
A sign of change, not a change of sign. I
You have
love
to
it.
think about it for a minute, but when you think about it, it's like, oh, yeah.
When I study people and work with cultures and organizations, I've never done what you did in this massive operation. But what I do know is that people don't like change typically. And it's not that they don't like change, but like if you just get into our biology, change equals uncertainty and uncertainty equals I'm not safe. It's
Yep,
just, we just go there, all of us.
absolutely.
So how are you so effective at creating a massive change at the same time creating that unity that you just described? That's a big
Yeah.
deal.
So first of all, not perfectly. Important thing that I like to think about is change is fun and exciting when you're in charge of it, and scary and all the things you talked about when it's being done to you. So
Right.
we did a lot of work to do this together. We didn't talk about a culture being imposed from one group or another. We talked
Hmm.
about co-creating the culture that we wanted. And we didn't start with just here's the culture, we're going to do culture work. That came out of here's the case for change. And we didn't keep that at the C suite. That rolled out to every member of the organization. Here's our case for change. And there were big reasons to be changing. We had our costs were going up and payments from insurance companies were flat to down. We had at the time everybody from Warren Buffett to Amazon was entering the healthcare space, massive changes in consumer expectations when it came to ease and convenience around healthcare. So we painted that picture for everyone to say, really, where we're staying is not the safe choice. Changing is the safe choice. And then we engaged everyone in the organization around how we did that change. Obviously, there was structure and cascading and things like that. But we talked about what describes our culture now. And we had this conversation with every colleague in the organization. What describes our culture now? And to get to this future state, what needs to describe our culture? And then we focused around those shifts with every colleague in the organization, and then built in, all the things you would think of when it comes to change management in terms of leadership, experience.
Sure.
Also, we called it hardwiring, looking at HR systems, at finance processes, anything that would pull away from or create a contradiction to what we said we needed to be in order to move forward.
And I'm just inferring that the success in this was not just pushing down change and saying, here we are, figure out how to deal with it. You made them a part of the change.
That
Is
was
that
a part of the change. A guy that actually not infrequently disagreed with on things, said something that really stuck with me that became core to how we approach this work. And this was specifically as we talked about the system wide strategy development process. He said the process of what we're doing here is more important than what we end up with, because this was the first time that we were coming together and doing it together. And so, again, I didn't always agree with him, but I'm like, man, that's genius. And that has influenced a lot of how I think about work now.
so? Just so I'm clear, the process is more important than the outcome. Is that right?
Yes. And by process, I don't mean step one, step two, step three. I mean the intentionality around getting buy in,
I see.
around, yeah, you know where I'm going now.
Well, I do know that you're an advocate of this idea of strategy over tactics. Is there overlap here with that where it's,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think this is something you are passionate about. I've seen you write about it, I think. What does this mean to you, this idea of strategy over tactics?
Well, if you don't get the right strategy, you could be perfect in execution on any tactic and it won't matter from a marketing standpoint, or back to our Kelly days. So you're selling time on private jets, but you're really focused on your Facebook strategy and you perfectly execute it. You're not where your customer is, or you're not talking about what's important to them. So I spend a lot of time. What is the pain that someone you're talking to is in, or, it doesn't have to be pain, challenge, whatever. And what is the future state, and really understanding that so that your messaging lands with them.
Let me ask you. So you're brilliant. That idea, it seems obvious to me. Like,
I know
duh.
it is
That,
obvious.
it is. So why are so many companies so oblivious or can't execute in that mindset?
I think we have a bias towards action.
Okay.
And I think that's probably a reason why. people want to be able to check off boxes. And
Yes.
a lot of times, this is something we find at Chief Outsiders. There are a lot of companies that are really good at operations, really good at running their business. But when it comes time to think about the market and what's going on out there, that's just very different than an operations mindset.
I think it comes back to that dopamine hit we were talking about. And it comes back to checking boxes. If I checked 3 boxes today, ooh, look at what I did.
Yeah, and see, I too appreciate the boxes, but my bigger dopamine hit is on the on the
Yeah,
strategy and that
yeah, yeah,
insights, the learning side. I've never
yeah.
thought of it that way, Clay.
You know the 10x is easier than 2x framework or idea? I love it. I work with my clients on this all the time. It's like if you were going to triple your revenue this year, what would be the 3 things that you would absolutely need to focus on? It's a pretty common question I ask someone. And then now go look at your calendar for the month.
Yes.
What percentage of what you're doing is actually in alignment with those 3 things? And
Yeah.
it's usually like 10% or something. It's because, again, they're not aligned with a really meaningful strategy. They're just checking boxes, putting out fires, keeping the doors open, which I get. But yeah, it's amazing to me. There's good reason for it. We feel productive when we're being productive, but
Mhm.
I think there's always a wake up for most leaders to like stop themselves. Hold on a minute. Yes, I'm being productive, but are these things in ultimate service of the goal or what we're trying to achieve here?
Yeah. That's also
Yeah.
something you talked about, our forum soapbox, something that groups like Vistage and others can be a mirror to people, to leaders, and help them realize, oh, yeah, you're not really aligned with what it is that you really need to be doing here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, I want to talk about something. I read an interview you did last year with Fearless, and you talked about culture in a way that I love, and I'm so curious how you execute this in culture. So we have this in common for sure. You say, ignore the idea of balance. Take time to truly understand your priorities, passions, and what brings you joy, and then allocate your time accordingly. I love that. And I talk about the same idea a lot. Why is that meaningful to you?
So that came out of what I learned during my break and how I try to live now, what I coach in terms of people that I mentor. It goes back to your, if you want a 10x, 3x, what have you, and then look at your calendar. Exact same idea.
Yeah, got it. Well, it's in my own life, what I've learned to do is like I audit my life. Where am I doing things that's energy depleting versus energy giving? And, it's either drop it, delegate it, or like get rid of it, get back into integrity. Life is fun when you are doing things where you are on purpose, using your zones of genius. You are in life. When you have a massive organization, I guarantee you 98% of the people are spending an improportionate amount of their time doing things that are like deeply energizing, is my assumption. So there's this ideal where we spend all of the time, we're forgetting about balance. We're really focused on spending all of our time doing tasks, doing work that is energizing. That's a massive effort. In my experience, it probably requires removing a lot of people out of the organization or ripping them into different parts of the organization. It's a big deal to take that ideal and
Mhm.
transform it into a large organization, from my experience. How do you think about that? How do you take this ideal and, I don't know, insert that into an existing large organization?
That's a good question. I've done it more on the mentoring outside of the organization side because I do feel like it's very, very personal. It's hard
Mhm.
to dictate that at a large scale, I think. How I do apply a version of that is I'm a fan of co designing jobs. So, not just saying, here's the job, this is what you're doing, but truly look at here's the work that needs to be done. Raise your hand. Who's passionate about this? Okay, great. Go do it. Who's passionate about this so that you can align where people get excited and jazzed? They're going to do the best work and they're going to be happier when they do it.
I agree. One of my favorite questions to ask in a team coaching session is, who here is doing something that you hate doing? And everyone immediately looks down and won't make eye contact with anyone.
Yeah.
And then finally someone goes like this, and then all of a sudden everyone's raising their hand, and then things get reshuffled. So it is moving through the fear. It is being willing to speak up. And I think what makes it work is, as a leader, you're asking that question, not what do you hate doing, but what do you want to be doing? I love that. Rather than here are the jobs, here's your job, how are you doing in your job? Asking the question, well, we need this for this organization to be successful. Who would feel energized by doing this? I think it's such a cool way of managing folks that a lot of people don't do. Hard to do in a big organization. It really is.
It
But
is. It is hard to do at scale. I'm not trying to do that part at scale.
yeah, way easier in small organizations where you can move and shift more freely. Yeah. I want to talk about your transition into chief outsiders.
Sure.
You moved from being a chief insider, being the CMO at MercyOne, to now being the chief outsider. And I'd love for you just to let the listeners know what that means. What is chief outsiders, and what do you do to support CEOs?
Sure. So we're fractional. We call it executive as a service. And there are about 120 of us, chief marketing and chief sales officers across the country. The CEO talks about making big things happen for our clients and working with people that we want to learn from. So it's a combination of the impact and the forum or whatever idea where I get to learn every day from brilliant people. It really has been the absolute perfect fit for me coming out of a full-time executive role. If I could have found another executive role that was a unicorn, I might have gone that route. But I realized that would be a unicorn. I would spend forever finding an organization that was right at that inflection point and that had the rules structured the right way. So I realized what I really love is building. As a fractional, I can go in and build and coach. Another thing I absolutely love, build and coach. That's the job. Been just a fabulous organization for me to learn from people I can't imagine I'm calling peers.
So cool. I'm so glad you made this shift in your life. Not an easy thing to do, to walk away from something that where you're deeply successful and to kind of reinvent yourself. Really cool.
It all came out of that idea of what is it that I value? And I value building, I value impact. So, where can I create those things and do the life part? And for me, because I was so heads down, value comes from work, all of those things, I had to do a time period where all I focused on was life. This was really hard for me, but people would say, "Oh, can we have a meeting? I'd like to talk to you about what have you." And I would say, "Thank you. We can schedule that for October." And it's scary because you're like, "Well, they still want to talk to me in October. Will they
I
forget
know.
about me?" All the things, all the scary things. But what I found was there is so much power in that. And I
Oh my
actually felt
gosh.
way better, not just healthy wise, which I got stronger, healthier, all of those things,
What did you have to let go of in yourself, or kind of shed from old Janelle, to be able to step into this new chapter?
almost everything,
Really?
honestly. Yeah, the way that I talk about it is I changed everything in my life except United Way, an organization I'd been supporting and working with for a while. But pretty much everything, everything else.
Well, structurally, yeah. I mean, like, your day to day is different, like your work is different. What did you have to let go of? Like, when you think about identity, when you think about what makes you tick, is there, oftentimes when we step into a new thing, we need to shed the old emotional
Yeah.
side, parts of our identity. I'm curious to learn a little bit about that. Like, what part of your identity did you need to let go of to, grow into this new Janelle?
Yeah. So that applies when I say change everything. So
Yeah.
one of the components that's probably the most easy to connect to is the value of busyness. Busyness equates to importance. And I purposefully had to make myself not busy to separate from that. And that was incredibly, will sound super silly, but it was incredibly hard. I went
Yeah.
this sticks out in my brain. I went fishing with my now 13-year-old, and I fully prepared. I brought a book, I brought a chair, like I'm ready to relax. And the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm just thinking, we've got to go. We've got to go. Like there's something next I've got to go to. And
Yeah.
I had to too strong to try to do things in parallel. I had to break that entirely to be able
Mm-hmm.
to rebuild. Another thing was my husband and I met when we were in high school. So he's literally known 15-year-old Janell. And I had a conversation with him before this happened. I'm like, I'm worried about this. How is this going? Like he in our marriage treats me and in our family interacts with me as a badass. And like if I'm not a badass at work, how is that going to change our home life? So I had to break that down and work through that.
Yeah.
One thing I will say is I prepared, so I didn't just wake up one day and say, "Oh, taking a break." I started telling my boss, my CEO in December, and then really in February, I'm really going to leave. And then didn't leave until June. So I also had that was helpful in terms
Mm-hmm.
of knowing that the break was coming. So it's another thing that I think helped.
Yeah. So many people get stuck, like you were stuck, and they don't have the courage, they don't have the willpower, they don't have the vision to move through the uncomfortableness that you just described. How did you do that? Where did that come from? Where did that energy, that passion, that motivation, how did you push through that?
Yeah. So one thing I think this applies from the excellent thinking and just trying not to be afraid of the hard things. So oftentimes I picture like being at the top of a ski slope and like, oh my gosh, that's really steep. How am I going to get down? And like just confidence that you're going to get down. So like I think that's just a general way that I think about
Yeah.
hard things. That said, the support system around me was phenomenal. Locally, I have
Mm.
a group of women leaders from the community called Nexus that just like I told one of the women that I was going to be doing this, and she's like, "Oh yeah, you're well networked. You'll be fine." And I never think of myself as that. So I'm like, "Really? Okay, well, she's pretty smart. She thinks I'm going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
maybe I'll be fine." And then Exceptional Women's Alliance, like I talked about, that cohort of people that I was meeting with every week, supporting, coaching, encouraging me to do the hard things and just giving me the roadmap for how to do it as well. Those are two top ones. Another thing I would say, I know you know way more about this. You have to replace a habit with something else. Get advice from someone, one of my cohort sisters in EWA, schedule one-on-one trips with each of your boys.
Mm.
So just being intentional about those things. And then someone else, mentor said, so what's something you've always wanted to do, but not had the time? I've just never really thought about that. And like, I wanted to, and one of my cohort sisters went to the Netherlands to take Dutch language lessons, like immersive Dutch language lessons. And I'm like, well, I don't think I'm going to do that, but I want to take pottery classes. And I've never not been able to, never made the commitment to always be there.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Good catch.
So I did that, committed to it. And now I have pottery that people buy sometimes. I think, remember we had a conversation from
Yeah.
outside the pottery studio once. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So I was intentional about, because it wasn't natural to me, the life side. So I
Yeah.
had to be intentional about discovering it.
I love it. And again, here we come back to community. Community is so important to help us move through these things. Yeah. So I'm looking at the time. I've got about 27 more questions I haven't asked you, but we got to wrap up here shortly because you've got CEOs to go take care of. A couple more questions though. I want to come back to 15-year-old Janell. If she could see you now, what would she be most proud of?
Probably the impact, because that's what she valued the most. And she'd be surprised by the other part. She'd be like, really? You can,
Which part would she be surprised by?
The life part. The life part.
The life part. Yeah. She'd be like, wait, hold on. You're making pottery? And
Yeah.
sometimes people buy what you're
She's like,
making?
you don't have time for that. We don't have time for that.
That's cool. And last question with 15-year-old Janell, what advice would you give to her if you could?
So I wouldn't tell her to do things differently. And here's why. Because I've thought about that before when I think about the before times and the impacts and the costs. Even though there were components of that that were hard for my kids wouldn't be who they are if they didn't see and learn and benefit from the experiences that I went through. I may have been able to get the same types of learnings and things like that I'm now able to apply to clients, but I don't really think I would have had the breadth or depth of experience if I hadn't been investing everything in at that point. So I don't think I would have told her to do anything differently. But as I talk to younger people now, I say it's a choice. And this is the choice that I made and the pros and cons that come out of that choice.
Yeah.
You have to decide. And I also, this is, I guess, one thing I would say is identify some bright red lines for yourself, because that probably would have been helpful back then.
I love it. There's one question I ask everybody at the end of the show. What truth helps the giant in you rise up when fear drags you down?
I'll go back to what you talked about, where experiencing whatever you are afraid of is the best inoculator. So
Uh,
I would say just tackle what you're afraid of.
There you have it, folks. This has been so fun. I would have loved to have had this conversation. Well, it would have been a very different kind of conversation 23 years ago, but it's a bummer that we didn't have a deeper conversation back then. I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I hope everyone also has enjoyed this. And if you take anything away from it, go get yourself a group, a forum. There's lots of them out there. If that doesn't work, go get yourself some pantyhose. That's the real insight here. Thank you for bringing that forward, Janell. Anything else you want to share before we sign off, or anything you want to pitch, or where can people find you? Anything else important for you to share?
I'd be remiss if I didn't pitch just a bit. So, Chief Outsiders, the firm that I join, every single person in what we call the tribe has decades of experience solving really, really hard problems. And we really do make big things happen for our clients. I'm impressed every day by the results that the people I get to work with achieve. So reach out if you want to grow or you have a challenge. And I just want to say thank you. This was really fun. I've always thought of you as a very smart, reflective, thoughtful person, and you got to join the tribe for a call. And as I told you then, I took away just things that made me rethink client stuff and things that made me rethink family stuff. So thank you for the work that you do and for having me on the show.
You're welcome. It's been an honor. Yeah, thoroughly being with the team and being with you now. It's been super, super fun. So thanks, Janell. And folks, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. And if you did, please follow the show and join me, Clay Stelzer, each week as we stop pretending. We name our fears. We talk to the 15-year-old versions of ourselves and remember what it takes to stand tall as the giants we already are. When leaders get real, like Janell just did, they make it safe for others to do the same. So please subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts, share with other leaders, leave a review if you're inclined, and help more people feel what's possible when fear doesn't run the show. Thanks so much.